T9C, got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris, this shit's fun.
T9C, got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris, this shit's fun.
Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. Football season is in full effect, people. We are only 48 hours away to opening kickoff of Ravens versus Chiefs, which is going to be the first game of the new NFL season. I mean, college football has been absolute chaos, and we're only in week 2. And yet, Florida State season is already over. And on this episode tonight, we got to discuss what's going wrong with Florida State. Why are they having such a nightmarish start to this year? Florida, Billy Napier, with that loss to Miami, it just made things on that hot seat a lot more hotter for him. And if he gets fired, could he be replaced by Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin? I got college football week 2 best bets for you guys. We currently are 3-2. We're hitting that 60%. And I feel really good about these picks this week compared to last week's picks because Houston, I didn't know they weren't going to have no damn quarterback, no offensive line, no defense. And it turns out UNLV is actually one of the better group of 5 schools out there. So look out for them. I got to give you guys my thoughts on Texas versus Michigan in the big house. And when it comes to the NFL side of things, the Raiders are taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. I think we're about to see a curb stomping in that game. Box Nix makes his NFL debut, but he could be in for a really rough performance against Seattle. And Colts fans need to be extremely concerned about Anthony Richardson going into this week. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in on YouTube. Shout out to my guy Robert Turner. Shout out to everybody that's listening on X. Wherever you're watching, do us a favor. share the stream so you can give your team good luck for this week. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Remember that we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you have a topic or question that you would like us to discuss on a future episode, you can send them in the DMs on Instagram at JT_Sports_ and on X at JT_Sports__. Before we dive into today's show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Aura. In football, we all know that no quarterback can win without good protection up front. It's also important that you protect yourself from data brokers who sell your personal information online to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who may want to target you. That's why you should use Aura, today's sponsor of this episode. Aura shows which data brokers are passing away your information on the internet and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Go to aura.com/JTsports in description or pin comment down below to get a 14-day free trial and protect your personal information from being exposed online. Cleaning up your information online not only helps reduce the amount of spam you receive, but it also protects you from hackers who could use this info to help gain access into your social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Go to our sponsor, aura.com/JTsports in description or pin comment down below to gain access to your 14-day free trial and protect yourself from hackers looking to gain access into your sensitive information online. All right, everyone, let's get into it. Let's adjust the camera real quick. There we go. Florida State is off to a nightmarish start to this college football season, man. Going into this year, they were expected to win over 9 games. They were the favorite to win the ACC. And we're only 2 weeks into the season, and the Seminoles are 0-2 in conference play, which essentially means that in terms of their playoff hopes, their season is over. You know, you got people asking, is Boston College and Georgia Tech actually quality teams? That's not really a good question to be having in the defense of Florida State, because regardless of how good those teams are, it's unacceptable for Florida State to get dominated the way they did in Doak Campbell against Boston College. Losing to Georgia Tech in the hard-fought game is one thing, but against Boston College, that team flat out looked like they quit. And there are so many holes that this team has. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei, look, most of us who have been watching this dude ever since his days at Clemson knew what to expect from him. He most likely was going to be an average quarterback at best, but I don't think any of us, including myself, were expecting DJU to just look unserviceable out there. I mean, he looks like he belongs starting for an FCS program than he does at the Division I level. I mean, this is absolutely embarrassment. This is an embarrassment what Florida State is putting on the field at quarterback, to say the least. I mean, DJU can't hit open wide receivers. He isn't really that athletic. He has a lot of size, but he's not really a great athlete. He's not Anthony Richardson. And you can't put all of Florida State's struggles on DJU. The wide receivers aren't doing you. Your offensive line can't open up holes in the run game, and your defense looks soft and lacks physicality. Florida State has had so many missed tackles. It's been downright disgusting. The DJ Uiagalelei experience has been extremely underwhelming, to the point you're wondering when Mike Norvell and that coaching staff are going to pull the trigger and they're just going to say enough is enough. We got to bench you, because you are pretty confident that you gave him a pretty big sum of cash when it came to NIL money. So it kind of complicates the decision to bench him, because whoever was responsible for coming up with that NIL money is probably going to feel some kind of way that they invested so much money into a quarterback that got benched 2 weeks into the season. But for Mike Norvell, you're not in a situation where you can afford to play politics. It doesn't matter how much money you're paying DJU. This dude is dog crap. Absolute dog crap. And it sets a bad precedence in the locker room when you continue to allow a guy to be this bad, stink up the joint, cost you games every week, and you refuse to bench him only because what he's getting paid. If Mike Norvell is somewhat of a decent coach, he would do what's in the best interest of the team and bench DJ Uiagalelei. Brock Glenn can't be this bad to the point where he's overthrowing 2 wide open wide receivers inside of the 15. It's embarrassing the quarterback play that DJU is putting out there. And Mike Norvell, there are questions about just how good of a head coach is this dude. Was he really carried by Jordan Travis? Florida State fans right now want this guy's head on a platter. I mean, they want to behead this dude down here in Tallahassee because they felt like they were fooled. They were having the assumption coming into this year that Mike Norvell had this program climbing to being a potential national championship team within the span of 2 years. Most people have Florida State making it into the playoffs this season. But with them getting out to this 0-2 start, it's pretty evident that they were extremely overrated. And why Florida State fooled so many people this year in terms of how people felt about how far they could go this year is off recency bias. Last year was the best season Florida State has had since the Jameis Winston era. And people took that season and they used it as a measuring tool to evaluate how good Florida State was going to be this year. The problem with that is they overlooked the inefficiencies that this team had at several key positions walking into this year. And their only excuse for overlooking those flaws was, man, Mike Norvell and that coaching staff, I trust them. When in college football, the teams that consistently win 10-plus games a year, they always recruit at a pretty high level. Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, they don't have rebuilding years because they reload due to how elite the recruiting is. Florida State's recruiting is solid, but it's not good enough to avoid rebuilding years like the one you're currently in right now. Mike Norvell has been heavily dependent on the transfer portal, but I don't feel like Mike Norvell builds Florida State's roster strictly via the portal. He does have a good amount of guys on that team who he recruited through high school, but he now has to be able to develop them if Florida State wants to be able to get back to the level that they were last year. Last year's FSU team had a good blend of guys that were brought in via recruiting, but also guys who were brought in via the transfer portal, but they weren't just one-year rentals like Keon Coleman. Johnny Wilson, Jordan Travis, they were on Florida State's roster for the last couple of years. You can develop guys from the portal. It's not that hard to do. Jordan Travis wasn't just a one-year rental. You know, he was on Florida State's team for about 3-4 years, and Mike Norvell developed him. You can't say Mike Norvell can't develop quarterback if he developed Jordan Travis. As a Miami fan, I remember the first time Jordan Travis played against the Canes. The only thing the dude could do was run the football. Every time he came in when he first got to FSU, you knew he was going to run the football. But over the next couple of years, he improved as a passer. So you can't just knock Mike Norvell for being able to elevate and properly develop Jordan Travis. He does know how to develop quarterbacks. If you can develop a guy from the portal that's been with your team for 3 years, you can develop guys out of high school. Where Mike Norvell went wrong is his evaluation of DJU. I don't know what he saw in DJ Uiagalelei from his film last year at Oregon State that made him think he was going to be a quality starter, but he needs to go back to the drawing board and rethink what quarterback is a good fit for his system. The problem with coaches in today's age in football is that even if you get a quarterback that doesn't necessarily look like a perfect fit for their system, these coaches' egos are so big that they think they can fix everybody. They think that you put any QB in their system and it's going to work out, and you're seeing it backfire right in Mike Norvell's face. DJU didn't look good at Oregon State. He got benched for Cade Klubnik at Clemson in the ACC championship game. You see how terrible Cade Klubnik looks like right now. There was nothing that showed evidence DJU was going to be the guy to repeat the success that Jordan Travis had and get Florida State to the point where they were last year, on the brink of being a playoff team. And before this season started, I told you guys straight up, Florida State and Missouri were the two overrated teams heading into this season because they were being judged based off the recency bias. They don't recruit at a consistent enough level to be able to sustain consistent 10-win seasons regardless of how easy the schedule may be. Now, should Mike Norvell get fired if Florida State goes 4-8 or 5-6, which there's a realistic possibility that happens because this team can't do anything. When you can't tackle nobody, you can't block nobody, you don't have a quarterback that can hit open receivers, and your receivers can't catch anything, how many games can you realistically win? I mean, I saw somebody on Twitter say that we could be seeing FSU versus Florida being played on Tubi. That could be the game to decide who ends up getting their third win of the year. Mark Norvell isn't a bad coach. I still stand on that. Despite being a Hurricanes fan, I can put my fandom and bias aside enough to see when there's a problem with coaching, and I don't see it with Mike Norvell. I see this just being a down year for Florida State. For the people out there that want to fire this dude because Florida State could have their worst season under him, you're being too overly emotional. Florida State, prior to this season, has improved record-wise and performance-wise every single year under Mike Norvell. Their first season wasn't that good. Their second season, they improved. Last year, year 3, they went undefeated in conference play, and you could make the argument that they deserve to be in the college football playoffs. You can't overlook 3 years of steady improvement and fire a dude just because of one bad year. Do you know how bad, or do you remember how bad the Willie Taggart era was? There was no growth. There was no improvement. It was just straight downhill ever since you hired Willie Taggart. And I got a therapist, believe it or not, that actually was part of Florida State's alumni back in their collective. And he told me, I believe it was before they played Boise State one year, that they already had the buyout money ready for Willie Taggart. They were just waiting to see how far things were going to hit the fan until they eventually pulled the trigger. And Florida State just gave Mike Norvell a new, fresh extension back in February when there was the chance he could have left and took the Alabama job. So Mike Norvell isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and I don't feel it would be the right decision for Florida State to fire him off one bad season. Every coach has a down year every once in a while. Not everybody's Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, where their down years are 2 losses. Lincoln Riley has been a consistent 10-win-plus coach every year. Last year, he only won 7 games at USC. Sometimes as a head coach, like the situation that Mike Norvell's in right now, with you having a bad season, you need years like this to help you reflect so you can change things that can help you avoid having similar seasons like this in the future. As much as it pains Florida State fans to hear that this is a rebuilding year, they got no chance to compete, it is a disappointment when you think about how bad things ended for you last year. You had a great season. You went 12-0, but everybody kind of forgets about it because of how badly you got embarrassed by Georgia. But you can't define the head coach based off one bad season and just overlook the 3 previous seasons that he had of growth and improvement. You know, he gave Florida State their best season in a decade. You got to show him some respect for that. You got to give this dude some time. It's not like you're in the same situation that Florida's in with Billy Napier, where you haven't had any growth at all. Florida has been terrible since year 1 under Billy Napier, and they're still terrible year 3 under Billy Napier. You see no improvement. That's the sign you need to fire a coach. You shouldn't fire somebody off one down season when they're coming off the best season in over a decade for this program. This is a bad year for Florida State. This is just a bad team. And I can't tell you guys with confidence that they're going to turn this around and they're going to win 6 games. It could be really ugly for Florida State. But having a down season like this could do more good for this program than it could do negatively. And I believe that Mike Norvell and his staff knew what they were in for this year. Are they surprised that they started out 0-2? Definitely. They probably didn't see that coming. But if you were to ask them before the season, what was their confidence level in terms of them being able to get back to where they were last year and their ability to compete for a national championship, if they were being honest with you, they probably would have told you, yeah, we may not be as good as what last year's team was. Last year's team had about 4 or 5 NFL players on it. It's hard to just simply replace that production overnight when you're consistently recruiting outside of the top 10. Florida State, recruiting-wise, ranks around 13th to 15th in the nation. That's not good enough to avoid a rebuilding season. So for Florida State, this obviously has been a nightmare of a season for them. It's been a massive disappointment. And there's a great chance that they don't even have a above 500 record. I don't know who they can be. Next week, they got to play Memphis, who a good amount of people out there got being in the 12-team college football playoffs this year. I don't know if they can even beat Cal, SMU, Clemson, or Miami. Things look really shaky right now for Florida State. And there's a lot of things wrong with this program that they're going to have to fix. And they aren't things that can just be fixed overnight. You're probably going to have to fire some guys on that coaching staff as well, and whoever was responsible for telling you to go after DJU. Jim Harbaugh is making his official debut as the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. They're going to be taking on the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Chargers are currently a 3-point favorite heading into this matchup. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I can't wait for the Chargers to kick the Raiders' ass, man. The Raiders fan base has been the most annoying and the most delusional fan base that I've seen on this platform. And I'm not speaking for the entire Raiders fan base, but a good amount of Raiders fans truthfully believe with a lot of confidence that they're going to win 9-10 games this year. I don't see that happening. And with how badly the Chargers are going to beat these boys this week, Raider Nation is about to get a quick reality check of what they're going to be in store for this season. This is not the same Chargers team that you played against on Thursday night when you got Brandon Staley fired and they had Easton Stick at quarterback. Jim Harbaugh is a proven winner as a head coach. This is the best coach that the Chargers have ever hired in over the last 2-3 decades. Jim Harbaugh, his first 3 years as the head coach for the 49ers, he led them to 3 straight conference championship games and the Super Bowl appearance during that span. The Chargers are going to be a better coach team, and they're going to be a more disciplined and a more physical team than what you've seen in years past. You need to stop comparing the Chargers to previous iterations that you've seen always be overhyped in the offseason because they haven't had a coach as good as what Jim Harbaugh is. Jim Harbaugh is an elite coach. He's one of the best football coaches of the past decade in terms of what he's done at the NFL level and what he's done collegiately. His method of winning works everywhere he goes. There's no reason why it's not going to work this season with the Chargers and they miss out on the playoffs. The talent is still there. You can't judge a team strictly based off talent. You have to also judge them based off coaching. And this coaching staff that he has assembled, Greg Roman as his offensive coordinator, everywhere Greg Roman has been, he's always produced some of the NFL's elite rushing attacks. They're going to be able to play complementary football. That offensive line is improved from what it was last year. And you got a pretty good group of running backs in J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. And it doesn't matter if those guys aren't big household names, because if you look at the history of Greg Roman's offenses, He elevates whoever he has at running back. If you plug a random running back off the street into Greg Roman's offense, they can produce at a high level because of how advanced his run blocking schemes are and how effective he is at utilizing his running backs. Jesse Minter is the Chargers' new defensive coordinator. You're not about to recognize the defense that you see the Chargers have this year due to how badly they've underperformed years past under Brandon Staley. Jesse Minter at Michigan, his 2 years there, they had the number 1 and number 2 ranked defense in yards per game and points per game consecutively in 2022 and 2023. There's enough talent on that defensive line with the healthy Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa to harass Gardner Minshew at quarterback. The Raiders' strategy this year is to run the football at will and rely on their elite defense to win games. They pretty much are the great value brand version of what the Steelers are. The problem with that is there's only one Mike Tomlin. Antonio Pierce is nothing close to Mike Tomlin. And what Raiders fans want to ignore is that the majority of Antonio Pierce's wins last year came against backup quarterbacks. The only win they had against a team with the above 500 record was when they got that Christmas miracle against Kansas City. And that's what it was, a freaking Christmas miracle. How often do you see a team win a game not completing a single pass outside of the first quarter? That's something that doesn't happen that often. You're not going to beat the Chargers if you don't have good quarterback play. Justin Herbert is an elite quarterback, and you pair him up with an elite head coach in Jim Harbaugh, you got to make sure that you have the same. Their defense can keep them around in this game. I'm not going to make it seem like the Los Angeles Chargers are some juggernauts. And the Raiders also do have a pretty good secondary. I love Jack Jones. I love Nate Hobbs. And you definitely love what they have on the defensive line with the addition of Christian Wilkins. And you're pairing him alongside with Max Crosby. But with the Chargers being stout up front and this team being built around physicality, the Raiders are going to have to ask Gardner Minshew to make some big plays downfield. And with this only being a 3-point spread that the Chargers are favored to win by, Vegas expects this to be a one-possession game. And when you're in close games, most of the times, the teams that pull off the wins are the ones that have the better quarterback because those are the ones who tend to be more reliable in these late-game situations. Gardner Minshew is not a reliable quarterback when you're in a one-possession game with 4 minutes left to go because he takes too much risk. He's a risk taker, which is why he won this starting job over Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell, the big knock on him was that he was too conservative. Yes, he takes care of the football, but he doesn't take enough chances downfield. With Gardner Minshew, the Raiders' offense is more explosive than what it was last year. But the downside of that is with the aggressive tendencies that Gardner Minshew tends to play with. I mean, every game you watch of Gardner Minshew, a receiver always gets messed up because he throws a lot of hospital balls. You remember last year when he got Michael Pittman's head taken off by DeMonte Casey against the Pittsburgh Steelers? You saw a lot of those throws in the preseason. And going up against an elite defense like the Chargers, Gardner Minshew can't be trusted to win a close possession game. The Raiders want to pound the rock at will against you and rely on their great defense and ask Gardner Minshew to do bare minimum, but it's hard to win that way when the opposing team's quarterback on the opposite sideline is a top 10 player at his position. The Raiders are going to need Gardner Minshew to make big throws late in this game and to take care of the football if they want to pull off the win, and I don't see that happening. The Chargers are going to stomp the Raiders this week. Give me LA 27-14 is my final score prediction. I don't see the Raiders having that much success offensively in this game with how improved Jesse Minter is going to have this Chargers defense playing. And the Raiders are not going to be able to play the brand of football they want to because the Chargers are going to stack the box and force them to win with Gardner Minshew throwing the football. And although Gardner Minshew is capable of having a couple of big plays, we also know that he's capable of producing turnovers as well. You can trust the Chargers to play mistake-free football. You know Justin Herbert can be trusted with the ball in his hands late in the game. You can trust him to elevate and carry the Chargers to a win if he has to. You can't say the same for the Raiders. This is a team that is only based off what they can do running the football. And if you take that away from them, you make them one-dimensional, that's the game plan to beating them. That's why I'm going to take the Chargers to win. Shout out to everybody in the comment section, wherever you're watching, X, YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss out when we drop new content. For all you podcast listeners out there that are tuned in right now, give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify if you're enjoying this episode. Shout out to everybody in the chat. My guy Anthony Manzano says, JT, do you think the Hurricanes go undefeated the rest of the season? And our only loss is to Georgia or Ohio State in the semifinals. I don't see Miami going undefeated this year. I could see them possibly losing to Virginia Tech. Maybe they have a upset loss to maybe Florida State. You can't rule out anything with how chaotic college football is. And I understand Miami football is in a very good spot right now, but it's a lot of games to be played. And I'm not going to make a judgment off of Miami just based off beating a Sunbelt Billy coach Florida team. You know, there are a lot of decent teams in the ACC. I think too many people are judging this conference based off what happened in week 1. Virginia Tech is still a capable opponent. I still wouldn't want to see Clemson in the ACC championship. There's a lot of football left to be played, but I am confident Miami will win the ACC this year, but I don't see them going undefeated. I can see them sustaining a loss or two somewhere during the stretch. Let's continue on. Bo Nix is about to make his official NFL debut in the Broncos' Week 1 opener against the Seattle Seahawks. Bo Nix looked fantastic in the preseason. He obviously was going to win this starting job when he got drafted by Denver. He was a perfect fit in Sean Payton's offense. Sean Payton really wanted this dude. He was making smoke screens to make sure no other team would think about drafting Bo Nix. And what makes Bo Nix such a great fit in Sean Payton's system as compared to Russell Wilson is that not only does he get the ball out fast, but he has the ability to stretch the field. He has a really good arm. He's not scared to push the football vertically deep. And with his mobility, being able to extend plays when protection breaks down allows Sean Payton to get more creative with the plays that he's going to be calling this year. You also can use design quarterback runs like zone reads, read options, quarterback power. The playbook is going to be more opened up for Sean Payton compared to what it was last year when he was limited in terms of his play calling with Russell Wilson regressing and not having the same athletic ability as he once used to have to do some of the things that Sean Payton has wanted to do. Now, as much as I believe in Bo Nix, I feel he's going to be in for a really rough debut against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks have Mike Macdonald as their new head coach. And Mike Macdonald last year, for those of you guys who don't know who this dude is, he was a defensive coordinator for the Ravens last year. The Ravens had the #1 defense in the NFL. They were one of the best teams in the league at getting after the quarterback and stopping the pass. They also were really good against the run. They were great situationally. And what makes me concerned about Bo Nix and why I believe he's going to have a rough debut against Seattle is that a lot of people and the NFL landscape compare Mike Macdonald to be the defensive version of what Sean McVay is on offense. And if you're getting compared to the Sean McVay of defense, that definitely gives me a lot of room of doubt that Bo Nix is going to have a great debut with the kind of exotic looks Mike Macdonald is going to be throwing at him. He's going to be utilizing a lot of exotic blitz packages. And Sean Payton can prepare this man as much as he wants to. But once you get into these games and once you get ready to snap the football and the communication between Payton and Bo Nix turns off in the helmet, It's kind of all in Bo Nix' hands from that point on. And it's going to be a handful asking Bo Nix to be able to lead the Broncos to a win against a defense that's going to be so well coached, that's going to be throwing so many exotic looks at him. If anything, this was probably the worst game that Bo Nix could start in this early into his career. And I'm saying this because I don't want you Broncos fans to turn on Bo Nix if he does struggle in this game. I want you guys to understand just how good Matt McDonald is as a defensive mind and how difficult it's going to be for not just Denver this year, but any offense that goes against Seattle's defense. Matt McDonald was the same guy calling plays for the Ravens defense that absolutely obliterated the San Francisco 49ers last year on Christmas Day when they played the Baltimore Ravens. So if you can shut down Kyle Shanahan's offense, you can shut down nearly anybody's offense. The only person who was able to crack the code to Mike McDonald's defense was Sean McVay. He put the most points up on Baltimore that they allowed all last season. The Detroit Lions got shut down by the Ravens defense. So if Bo Nix struggles in this game, if you're a Broncos fan out there, you can't say, oh, he's a bust, oh, we hyped this dude up. No, it really is just the fact that Seattle's defense is that good and they're that well coached. They got a lot of talent on that defensive line. Not only do they have guys who can stop the run, but they got tons of pass rushers. They got tons of depth there too. You're going to have guys that are going to be coming in third down situations as situational pass rushers. Seattle has everything needed to have one of the NFL's elite defenses this year, which makes this a tough debut for Bo Nix. I could really see him struggling out there with how well coached and how good Seattle's going to be defensively, and that's why I'm going to take Seattle to get the win. It's tough to see a rookie quarterback like Bo Nix, regardless how good he is going to be this year, to have success against the Seahawks defense. You got, even if the Denver Broncos have Bo Nix, or not Bo Nix, but Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, I still would see those guys struggling. This is an outstanding defense that the Seahawks are going to have, and I really believe that it's going to be tough sledding week one for Bo Nix. I don't think he's going to be garbage. I think he's going to have the second best rookie season out of all of the rookie quarterbacks this year. But getting Mike McDonald to start your season off, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Okay, so I want to give you guys my college football week 2 best bets. Last week, we went 3-2. We're currently hitting 60% on the year. And we messed up because we took Colorado -10 against North Dakota State. That's a mistake. We took Houston -2.5 against UNLV. And Houston, turns out, they're just one of the worst Power 4 teams in all of college football. They got no QB, no offensive line, no defense, no nothing. So we learned from those mistakes, and we're ready to make up for it. We're aiming to go 5-0 this week. We're taking Texas -7.5 on the road in the big house against Michigan. I see this game playing out really similar to how Clemson versus Georgia did last week. Michigan's defense is going to keep them in this game for the first couple of quarters. Texas is a juggernaut offensively. They got a top 10 offensive line. They got a really good group of wide receivers. Quinn Ewers is a pretty good quarterback. And with Wink Martindale being Michigan's defensive coordinator, having an NFL background, there's going to be a lot of advanced, exotic looks that Michigan is going to be throwing at Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian. And it's going to be tough for any offense to have success against Michigan's defense. You got Mason Graham. You have Will Johnson at corner. Those are two of the best players at their respective positions going into next year's draft class. So Michigan definitely is going to have a stout defense in this game. But eventually, I expect Texas to pull away in the second half because I don't see Michigan's offense having too much success at all in this game. I mean, Donovan Edwards is on the cover of NCAA College Football 25, and I don't know why, because, I mean, this dude didn't look that good last year, and this season, he isn't even the best running back on the team. And Michigan's run game isn't as dominant this year as what it was last year due to the new faces that they have on the offensive line. And the only playmaker they have offensively right now is Colson Loveland. You got concerns at quarterback. I thought Alex Orji was going to be the starter, but Davis Warren ended up getting the nod, and he looks mid at best. Michigan doesn't have the ability to play complementary football like what they did last year due to how they're going to be handicapped with their quarterback position, and they don't have enough weapons in the passing game that has success to take advantage of a questionable Texas secondary. So I see Michigan losing 34-10 is my final score prediction for this game. The home field advantage definitely is going to play a little bit of a factor early, but Texas also went on the road and beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And it's way difficult to win in Tuscaloosa than it is in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Not trying to be disrespectful to Ann Arbor, not trying to be disrespectful to the Big House, but Alabama has only lost about 10 or less games at home over the last decade or so. So if you can go on the road and beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, most of that production from last year that was on that team for that win is still going to be playing in this game. Playing in a hostile environment is not going to be enough for a Texas not to cover. So I love -7.5 with Texas. I'm taking Alabama with the 31.5 point spread against USF. USF is one of the better group of 5 schools out there, but Alabama, this is one of the best teams that Alabama has had in over the last 4 to 5 years, just off the fact that this is a complete team. In the past, Alabama hasn't been complete. Their offensive line hasn't been as good as what it is this year. As a matter of fact, Alabama's offensive line is the best this year that it's been in over 5 years. They have about 2-3 guys on this line who are NFL prospects. Your defense is going to be outstanding as well. And Jalen Milroe looks a lot better this year than what he was last year. USF, I don't think that they end up getting blown out completely in the first half. I do think that it's going to take Alabama at least 3 quarters to cover that 31.5 point spread. I don't see this being a halftime cover. I see them covering once we get late into the third quarter. USF, they have a pretty talented quarterback. They got a really good coaching staff. So it's not just going to be one of those affairs where you don't have to watch the game and not have to break a sweat because they're going to cover at halftime. Like Alabama probably is going to fight to cover that 31.5 point spread for at least the first 3 quarters in this game. And once we get into the fourth quarter, that's when they really should be able to lock this thing up, and they should be up by 40. That's when they put the backups in, and hopefully the backups don't allow USF to backdoor cover. Another game that I really love is Colorado +7 on the road against Nebraska. I know I told you guys after them not covering against North Dakota State last week that I was done betting money on Colorado, but it's hard for me to not bet on them this week with them being an underdog. Even if they do lose this game, Nebraska isn't good enough to completely dog walk Colorado, regardless if they're playing at home. You got to remember that last year, Colorado covered the spread in the majority of the games that they were underdogs in against UCLA, Oregon State. The only game they didn't cover where they were a massive underdog was against Oregon because Oregon was just outright better, and that game was being played in Autzen. Nebraska's home field advantage is definitely going to be a factor, and it's going to be difficult for Colorado's offense to get going early. But at the same time, Nebraska has a true freshman quarterback out there in Dylan Raiola. And I think Dylan Raiola is going to have a great career. But when you're going up against a defense like Colorado's, that's a step up from UTEP. Even though we have concerns about Colorado's defense, I don't see Dylan Raiola just picking apart Colorado's defense and going 21-23, 4 touchdowns and 300 passing yards. I don't think Colorado's defense is that trash to the point where a true freshman quarterback is just going to dissect them. And with their new defensive coordinator, he's way more aggressive when it comes to blitzing. So there's going to be some looks that Dylan Raiola is going to have to account for pre-snap. And normally when it comes to making pre-snap reads, being able to see what side the blitz is coming and being able to slide protections to that slide is really difficult. And you're asking a lot out of a true freshman to be able to pull that off. Nebraska isn't a good enough team where they're just going to roll over Colorado, especially with them having two of college football's best players and Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. And Nebraska defensively is really good. But what makes Nebraska's defense have a little bit of concern against Colorado offensively is that Colorado has 4 NFL wide receivers. And it's hard to guard 4 NFL wideouts. Most teams don't even have 2 NFL corners, let alone 3. So if you're Nebraska, even if you are able to get after Shedeur Sanders like how you did in the first half of last year, Colorado's receivers are explosive enough that they can convert 3rd and long situations, 2nd and long situations. Like any play Colorado decides to drop back and pass, they're a threat to score a touchdown with the amount of talent and depth that they have at wide receiver. And if you're just going to overlook the talent that Colorado has at receiver, then you're just fucking biased. You got to stop being biased. If you're going to bet on these games, you need to be well informed about the opposing team that you're betting against. And you're being a little bit ignorant if you're just going to disregard how deep Colorado is at wideout. I mean, their wide receivers are really good, and 4 or 5 of those dudes are going to be playing on Sundays next year. So with that amount of talent and with you having Shedeur Sanders, it does make things a little bit difficult for how you're going to game plan around that defensively, because if you send extra guys all you want to, one of these wide receivers is going to be open. So even though I'm not confident Colorado is completely going to win this game, I trust them enough to be able to cover. Nebraska, if they win, it's going to be a 1-possession game. Colorado has enough talent offensively to keep this being close, especially with how good Shedeur Sanders is. Nebraska is going to be able to ground and pound them. I have no doubt about that. But Colorado's going to get theirs in this game. I'll probably take Colorado to win. I'm not confident about it, but I am confident that they cover the 7-point spread. And there's a chance that this line probably moves to Colorado plus 8.5, Colorado minus 9.5. If Colorado is a 10-point underdog, that's free money in my eyes. Next up, I got Penn State. I'm taking them minus 34 points against Bowling Green. They should cover this game by halftime. Bowling Green looked pretty good last week, but Penn State offensively looks way more dynamic with their new offensive coordinator. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because it's a little bit tricky to pronounce. But with how good Penn State is defensively, and now with this offense being able to generate big plays downfield vertically, they should cover at halftime. This probably should be a 48-7 game final. And lastly, I got Ole Miss. I'm taking them minus 42 against Middle Tennessee State. My homeboy Ralph Mincy plays for the Blue Raiders, so shout out to him. Can't wait to see my boy ball out there. But Ole Miss is just a juggernaut offensively. I mean, they got a good offensive line. They're deep at receiver. Jackson Dart should be a Heisman contender this year. And defensively, they got a lot of talent this year. And Ole Miss isn't going to get tested until a month from now when they finally get done playing this cupcake tune-up schedule. So Ole Miss should take care of business. They took care of business against Furman last week, and they should be able to handle Middle Tennessee State. So these are my college football week 2 bets. I feel extremely confident about these. I was extremely confident about the ones I had last week, but I didn't know that Houston was just going to be complete garbage. They ended up going back and forth playing musical chairs at quarterback. They got no defense. And Colorado, I don't love betting on them as a favorite, but I love taking them as an underdog. So I'm confident about these picks. I wouldn't recommend parlaying all these because it's like if you parlay these, then you need all these to hit, even though I'm confident they will. But, it's better off if you kind of bet these single and then, you put in like a $10, $15 5-leg. Last week I took all of these single. I had one parlay going, but Colorado messed that up. So I just ended up just taking them single, and I was up pretty good. 60%, you're still up in some profit if you take these. So these are my week 2 best bets. Leave your thoughts on the comment section down below. Shout out to everybody in the chat that's tuned in. Shout out to Chris Brady. Shout out to Robert Turner. If you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. Mailbag questions. If you have any questions that you would like answered on a future episode, or you got any topics in specific that you want us to discuss, send them in the DMs on Instagram at JTSports_ and on X at JTSports__. I was arguing with my buddy in the car a few nights ago because he was telling me that he could get 4 yards off 15 carries in the NFL game. And I was just telling him, man, you're ridiculous. And he thought that I was just being an a-hole when I really wasn't. I was telling him, like, the average person can't play a down in the NFL. The level of athletes that you see in the NFL is unlike anything that you see in any sport. You got guys like Jordan Davis that are 330 pounds running 4'8", 4'9". You got Myles Garrett at defensive end. I mean, why would you even want to play a single down in the NFL and get whacked by one of these behemoths? Imagine if you're a linebacker or you're a safety or a cornerback. You're the last line of defense to keep Derrick Henry or Anthony Richardson from scoring. I mean, to just sit and say that you could pick up 4 yards or 15 attempts in an NFL game, like, I don't want to say it's being a little bit ignorant, but, it's just kind of hard to see happening. Like, myself included, I don't think I would get a single yard playing in the NFL. It's like you're just dealing with different caliber athletes. And what looks like a big hole on TV, like he was telling me, man, I feel like I could get 4 yards if I get a screen and I got 3 blockers in front of me and nothing but green grass. You see, the problem is the amount of space that you see on TV is not the actual amount of space that you actually see when you're on the field. I mean, in the NFL, the speed of the game is so fast that if you're playing running back and you've never had any experience playing running back, you're not going to be able to see a wide open hole because it's going to close up in about a half a second. You got to have fast reaction time. You got to have quick reflexes when you're playing at the NFL level. You got to be a different kind of athlete to be able to play in the National Football League. And I don't think that just some average person can just get off the couch, work out for a couple of months, and play in the NFL game and have success and even pick up like 4 yards in one play. Because if you're playing in the NFL, you've been playing football for about 10, 11 years of your life up to that point, most likely, unless you started playing in high school. But the speed of these players and how fast these open holes close up, I mean, you could have a lot of green grass if you're me and you get a screen and you got some blockers out in front of you. But with how fast a lot of wide open space condenses, it's hard to see me having at least 4 yards in the NFL game. But, even if you give me 15 carries, I probably will have maybe negative a half a yard. And I told my homeboy the same thing. He was like, well, all I'm going to do is just get the ball and fall down. It's like, bro, you're not even going to be able to see the hole develop. You're not going to want to get hit by Jalen Carter or freaking, who's that linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers? Bro, how can I not think of his name right now? I don't know. It's just, I wouldn't want to be playing in the NFL with the amount of damage that these dudes do to each other on a weekly basis. And it's just hard to want to get hit by a guy like Fred Warner. Imagine if you still have prime Ray Lewis out there, prime Brian Urlacher. I would be thinking twice about wanting to play football. Like, if I seen one of those dudes, I'll just give myself up and slide. Because I ain't trying to get hit by one of those dudes and be laid out in a damn hospital. But moving on. One of the biggest games of this college football season is about to be played this week. Week 2, we got Texas traveling to the Big House in Ann Arbor to take on the defending national champions, the Michigan Wolverines. And I'm going to just be honest with you guys. most Michigan fans already think that I'm a Michigan hater, so it doesn't really matter how objective I try to be in breaking down this game. So I'm just going to give you my prediction flat out. Texas is going to steamroll Michigan. I think that this game is going to look exactly similar to what we saw last week in that Clemson versus Georgia game. Michigan is going to keep this thing close for the first two halves or the first two quarters due to them having Wink Martindale as their defensive coordinator. He's going to be throwing a lot of exotic looks at Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian. And no matter how good of an offensive mind you are and how good of a quarterback you are, when you are going up against Wink Martindale, who's one of the most legendary defensive coordinators in NFL history, you're going to struggle, at least for the first two quarters. And I can see this being a 13-7 game at halftime, and then Texas eventually pulls away in the second half because Michigan's defense starts to get tired. They start to get gassed due to their offense not being able to do anything at all. Michigan's offense looked absolutely terrible against Fresno State. And you could see an offense that lost a lot of production from last year. The offensive line wasn't as dominant as what it was in 2023. Colson Loveland is the only reliable playmaker that they have on offense. The receivers aren't really that good. And that quarterback, you're mid at that position. Davis Warren, I'm rooting for him. I love his story. I love what he's had to overcome to get to this point. But he's no J.J. McCarthy. And as much as we slander J.J. McCarthy for being a game manager, not really being asked to do too much, one thing you got to give J.J. McCarthy props for is that when Michigan asked him to throw the football to win games, he was able to get it done. If you got to ask Davis Warren to win you games, you're in trouble. Michigan is solely dependent on their ability to have success on the ground. Texas knows that. And with that, they're going to stack the box, and they're going to force Michigan to beat them by throwing the football. And they don't have the style of team to beat you playing complimentary ball as what they did last year. You see, last year, they were a run-first team with the ability to throw. This year, they're strictly just a run-first team. They need to run the football to open up the pass, because if you can't get that ground game going, you're not going to have too much success throwing the football neither. So if their run game isn't effective, this offense is going to be ineffective. And now running back, Donovan Edwards is on the cover of College Football 25, and he's not even the best running back on the team. He looks like RB3, RB2 out there. I mean, the dude just looks slow and sluggish, and he doesn't have that same power that he had in 2022. I don't know what happened to Donovan Edwards, but in 2022, this dude's explosiveness, his acceleration was off the charts. But over the last 2 years, maybe he got an injury that we didn't know about that took away some of that explosiveness, but you're not going to have an easy time running the ball on this Texas front. Even with them losing two All-Americans on the interior of their defensive line, they've done a lot to try to recoup for those losses. And they're not going to be as good against the run this year as what they were last year. Even Texas fans would agree with that. But if you're just a run-dependent team and that's your way of winning games and you don't have the ability to throw, then Texas is going to suffocate you. Similar to Clemson. You know, Clemson has a pretty good group of running backs, but Georgia took away their ability to run the ball and made them have to throw it when they didn't want to. And that's the same situation that Texas is going to put Michigan in. With Texas going on the road to play in a hostile environment, it's going to be another reason why Texas is going to get out to a slow start in this game and why at halftime this is going to be a close game. But the majority of this offense this year played on that Texas team last year that beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Big House. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Michigan's home field advantage. But if Texas can beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa, then they can definitely beat Michigan in the Big House. Playing in Tuscaloosa is more difficult than playing at Michigan. Alabama has lost less than 10 games at home over the span of a decade. So this is a Texas team that knows how to prepare for playing in environments like this. And the crowd definitely is going to have an effect on them. But once we get into the second half and Michigan's offense keeps going 3-and-out, and they can't sustain drives, and that defense ends up having to be on the field for 80, 95 plays, you're going to start to see Texas wear down Michigan's defense. Michigan does have a good amount of depth on defense as well, but they're not as deep on defense as what they've been the previous 2 years. So give me Texas to win this game. 34-14 is my final score prediction. And I got them covering that 7.5 point spread as well. And don't be surprised if you see the line in this game rise up a couple of more points, because this really should be a one-sided affair. I mean, Michigan is not as good as what they were last year, and it's pretty evident with how they looked against Fresno State. The hot seat for Billy Napier is absolutely scorching right now. And with the recent blowout loss that Florida sustained to Miami, 41-17 was the final score, it's pretty clear that Billy Napier is going to get fired. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when Florida does eventually pull the trigger on him and they give Billy the pink slip, who's going to be in line to be his replacement? I've seen a lot of Florida Gator message boards out there say that they want Lane Kiffin. I don't think that Lane Kiffin is going to leave Ole Miss for Florida. Lane Kiffin does have a lot of love for the state of Florida. I do believe that he has a couple of properties or two located in southern Florida. But the thing about leaving Ole Miss for Florida is that you're saying that Florida gives you a better chance to win than staying at Ole Miss. Ole Miss as a program right now is miles ahead of where Florida is. The only thing that you can sell Lane Kiffin on at Florida is that you're in Gainesville. You have proximity to the Florida pipeline where you can get guys from Central Florida. You can get guys out of Jacksonville. You can get guys from South Miami. It's really easy to recruit at Florida. But outside of recruiting, I mean, other than that, there's not a lot of things that makes Florida such an enticing job that Lane Kiffin should leave the situation that he's at, because Florida is a rebuild. It's going to take at least a year or two to hit the ground running out of Florida. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss already has built pretty much a playoff contender at this point. And if you were to leave that and jump ship to Florida, you have to start all over again. And plus, you're treated like a king at Ole Miss. Last year was the best season that Ole Miss football has had in years. So even if Lane Kiffin has a couple of down years, I mean, he's going to be treated like a king to the point where he doesn't have to worry about his job being in jeopardy. When you go to a school like Florida, you don't have a lot of time to turn that program around. That program expects you to have them competing for the SEC title within year or two. And Billy Napier, I never felt like he was a good fit for Florida initially, only because Florida isn't a good job if you don't have experience coaching in a power conference in the past. Due to the pressure that comes with coaching at a school like Florida, you walk in and you see that legendary Tim Tebow number 15. You see those BCS national championships with Urban Meyer, Steve Spurrier. It's not worth it leaving a school that already is in contention to win the SEC, make it to the playoffs, and be a natty contender just to have to rebuild at a school like Florida where you're not going to have enough time to properly turn that program around due to the pressure that Florida puts on you and how fast they want you to turn things around. At Ole Miss, you're given a little bit more leniency than what you would be given at a school like Florida. And I really think that Lane Kiffin has it good at Ole Miss. I mean, when it comes to NIL money, they got no problem dishing out the money that it takes to get some of the better guys out of high school recruiting and in the transfer portal. Florida's NIL collective is like, it's a little bit weird because at one point when Billy Napier first got there, it seemed like their collective was unwilling to spend big on players. But then they end up paying Jalen Rashada like what, damn near $10 million? Florida, just from an infrastructure standpoint, with the athletic director and the guys that they have in their front office, they can tend to be a little bit chaotic. And for Lane Kiffin, you're better off just staying where you're at, especially when you think about how left things have went for you when you were at Tennessee, USC. You're in your perfect spot at Ole Miss. I don't see Lane Kiffin wanting to leave Ole Miss, have to rebuild at Florida, and take on the pressure that comes with them forcing you and rushing you to get them back to what they were in the glory days under Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow. So I don't see Ole Miss losing Lane Kiffin. If anything, they probably will match whatever offer Florida throws at Lane Kiffin. And Florida isn't a better job than what Ole Miss is right now in terms of where Ole Miss is with how well they've recruited, how good they've utilized the transfer portal, and they're in a prime position to make a deep playoff run this year. Why would you want to start over again? You feel me? I don't see any benefits of Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss for Florida. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we get up on out of here, the Indianapolis Colts are going to be taking on the Houston Texans. This is year 2 of the Anthony Richardson experiment. And I think that Colts fans need to be extremely worried about Anthony Richardson going into this week 1 game against the Houston Texans, because the Texans are the most complete team in the AFC this year. They're going to have a great offense. They're stacked at receiver. They're loaded at running back. CJ Stroud already is viewed as a top 7 quarterback based off what he did in his rookie season. Imagine how good he could be this year. And defensively, you're stacked at every position. You got a good defensive line. You got Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson coming off the edge to get pressure on the quarterback. You're good at linebacker. You got a great secondary. Derek Stingley, not only is he a candidate to be a first-team All-Pro, but he could be one of the few defensive backs that takes home the honor of Defensive Player of the Year. And Anthony Richardson, the reason why I have red flags about him in this game is that he missed the majority of his rookie season due to that shoulder injury, which pretty much erased a year of development for him. And the biggest thing that Anthony Richardson needed was more reps. So his second season is pretty much his rookie season with the small amount of games that he was able to play, which means that he still is going to be fairly inconsistent. You're going to see him struggle to hit wide receivers when they're open in the short, intermediate ranges of the field. You're going to see some inconsistent decision-making. He's going to make some good plays. He does have the athletic ability to cause a problem for Houston when he gets outside the pocket or when Indianapolis decides to utilize him on design quarterback runs. But if you're DeMeco Ryans, being one of the better defensive minds in the league, you're going to do whatever you can to shut down the impact Anthony Richardson is going to have on the ground. And you're going to force him to become a pocket passer, which is not the strength of his game right now. I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson is going to be garbage for you Colts fans that are about to get in your feelings about this. What I'm telling you is that with how raw Anthony Richardson still is, this is a game that he's going to struggle in due to how good Houston's defense is going to be this year. It's going to be hard to have success being efficient throwing the football against a really good secondary that has guys like Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley in the secondary, and guys who can get constant pressure on Anthony Richardson and force him to have to speed up his decision-making process. I really wouldn't be looking to start Anthony Richardson if you have him on any of your fantasy teams against this Texans defense, because he could be in for a really bad afternoon. And we saw the Anthony Richardson experiment kind of come into fruition to what he's going to look like this year in their final preseason game when he came in against the Cincinnati Bengals. He started out 7 of 8. He was looking really good. He threw a touchdown, and then after that fast start, he went like 1 of 6 on his last couple of pass attempts, and he threw a pick 6 to Jordan Battle. That's what you're going to see out of Anthony Richardson this year. And this game is kind of going to be a precursor to what Colts fans can expect out of AR this year. You're going to see a lot of inconsistent play. He's going to have some good moments and he's going to have some bad moments. It's going to be a roller coaster ride that you're going to see out of Anthony Richardson year 2 under Shane Steichen. I'm not saying that he's going to be bad, but what I'm saying is that you're going to have a lot of hot and cold performances. And Houston, with how good they are defensively, with them having a fantastic defensive-minded coach in D'Amico Ryans, it's the perfect recipe for Anthony Richardson to have an off game. And I could see the Texans beating Indianapolis at least by 10 points with how one-sided this game could potentially be if you do see Anthony Richardson struggle to adjust to the looks that D'Amico Ryans is going to be throwing at him. You know, there's a lot of development that Anthony Richardson has to make. I think he's going to be better as we progress throughout the season. We could see him have the same performance in the second half of this year that we saw that Jordan Love struggle for the first 2 months of the year. Then we get into late November, early December, and you start to see Anthony Richardson get hot and play better because he has more experience under his belt. The game has slowed down for him. But this early into the season, I don't like the matchup between the Texans defense and the Colts offense. I think this thing could get incredibly one-sided. So I like the Texans to win this game, and I feel like Anthony Richardson is going to struggle. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in wherever you're watching, X, YouTube. Do me a favor before you leave up on out of here. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content, when we go live. We're going to be doing a live call-in show the next time we go live, either Thursday night after Ravens Chiefs or Saturday night when we recap and give reactions to all of the Week 2 college football action. So we're going to have the phone lines open, so make sure that you're tuned in. I don't want to be going live and we open up the phone lines and nobody calls in. Like, I want to have some good dialogue with you guys. And if some of the phone calls go good enough, it could become a potential video that gets uploaded. You could have a video with your phone call between me and you on the channel. So make sure that you just have a little reminder, take a little mental note, write a little sticky note that JT Sports is going to be doing a call-in show this Saturday. And I'm going to be doing my fantasy football league tomorrow night. I'm going to be releasing more details on that later on tonight or early tomorrow morning. If you want to join my fantasy football league, you have to be in my Discord server because I've done too many of these fantasy leagues and I always win them because you guys only play for the first couple of weeks and then you get inactive. I don't want to play with no inactives. You feel me? If I'm going to do a fantasy league, I want you guys to be active in it, which is why you got to join the group chat first. So I'm going to have more details on that coming out, but I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Shout out to my guy, Robert Turner, my guy, Zero Cool, and everybody that tuned in to tonight's episode. I will see you guys shortly with another episode.